quadratic equations and inequalities. In this lesson, we're going to focus mainly on just how to solve quadratic equations. So first, what is a quadratic equation? Well, a quadratic equation is an equation in this form. A key thing there being the highest power being an x squared. So x squared plus ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 is a quadratic equation in one variable, where a, b, and c are real numbers. So our main goal today is going to be how to solve this. Like, how do we solve this? There's lots of different ways. We're actually start off with the zero product property. Actually, before we go into this, I just want to point out here that all three of these things are all the same. If I ask you to find the zeros of a quadratic function, I want you to find the x coordinate or the x-intercepts of a function. X-coordinates of the x-intercepts. If I want you to find the x-intercepts. And if I want you to find a solution to a set of equations. These are all the same. What I want you to do there is set the function equal to 0 and solve for x. Again, no, remember, you're saying the function equals 0. We're not substituting in the 0. We're setting it equal to 0 and we're solving for x. So all those mean the same. If you want to find the zeros of the function, if you want to find the x-intercepts, or if you want to find solutions to the set. Now, how do we solve it when we set our function equal to 0? That's when we use the zero product property, which just says if you have two things being multiplied together that equals 0, that means either the first one equals 0, or the second one equals 0, or they both equal 0. And then how do we turn an equation like this into that? We do this by factoring. So this is the factoring method. We're going to go over 3 different methods to solve a quadratic. The first method, which is for most people the easiest method if you know how to factor, is the factoring method. It's also the fastest if you know how to do it. So we're going to solve a quadratic equation by setting equal to 0 and factoring. So we have this one, solve 2x squared plus 4x minus 16 equals 0. And we're going to try to solve this by factoring. Now first, if there's a number in front, normally I would do is multiply these two terms together and try to factor. But if you remember, the first step of factoring is always, could you factor anything out of all of them? These all divided by 2. So I can actually factor out of 2. And then I get this. Remember, factoring is just factoring it out and then dividing each thing by it. So there's our factor of that. And since it's actually an equation, I could just divide by 2. You just get rid of the 2. You divide both sides by 2, which I honestly could have done from the beginning, and you get this. Since it is an equation, you could just divide everything by that. And all we have to do now is factor it. Now this is a more basic factoring. There's no number in front, so all we have to do is look at the last term, find out two things that multiply to get this number, but add to get that number. It is a negative 8, so it's like negative 1 and 8, negative 8 and 1, negative 2 and 4, negative 4 and 2. And I want them to add up to become positive 2, so it'll be this one. Again, I'm showing all the steps. I don't expect you guys to do this. I expect you to just factor it really quickly and then be done with it. So I have that. So it is factored. And now, like to say, since it's factored, now we can split and solve it. Now again, I can only do this when it equals 0, right? So we're going to set equal to 0, and then we're going to factor, and then we're going to split and solve. Split it, you get x equals negative 4 and 2. So something like that. The book also goes over how to do it with the calculator. Now if you want to solve this in a calculator, what they do is they just graph it. So you go to y equals, you graph 2x squared plus 4x minus 16. And you hit graph. Now if you remember what I said earlier, you have to actually find the zeros. So they're right here and right here. Now that's a negative 4 and that's 2. But how can you make sure? If you want to make sure, you got to hit second, calculate. You go to 0, right here, number 2. And now, it's hard to see where my grid is, but it tells you there it's at 0. So, if I want to find, let's only find the right one. I'm not going to go through all of them. Let's hit right. There you go. There's my little cursor. So, keep on. I want to find the 0 right there. So, like, what's going on here is you have a graph. Right? And I'm trying to find my 0 that's right here. So, it's going to ask you to do left bound. So, what I do is, I go low left of my point, hit enter, and then it asks for right bound. You go low right of your point, hit enter, and then it's going to search in between those 2 points. So like I'm close to my 0, I'm going to left a little bit, hit enter. So now I click this value. Now it says it wants a right bound. So you go back, right, there's my answers around here. So you go right of it, click enter. So I hit it over there. And then it says guess. And what the calculator is doing once I hit enter is going to search between those two values to find the answer. And then it tells me it's at 0, right? Which is what I got. So that's how you do it in the calculator. It's a little bit more work. I mean, it's easier, but it's like more time consuming. Let's do another one. So find all the zeros of the quadratic function. So in this case, they didn't set up for you. You gotta know yourself. All the zero means I want to know my function equals 0. So I'm gonna set this equal to 0. We did this before with linear functions, but now we're doing quadratic functions. Now again, this is a basic factoring, so I can just factor this. You go to 9. I need two things to multiply to get 9, but add to get -3. Notice it's a positive 9, so it means it has to be the same sign. So it could be 3 and 3, or -3 and -3, or 1 and 1, 9, and -1 and -9. Again, I don't expect you to do this. I'm doing it right now because I'm teaching. These two get me it. If I multiply those two, I get 9. If I add them, I get -6, which is what I need. So there I go. X minus 3, x minus 3. You can split and solve, but either way, you're going to get the answer. You're going to get, I should still work. X minus 3 equals 0. I'm only write it once because there's two of them. And x equals 3. So you have one answer. Now, what happens here is that it's x squared. You should have two answers, but I only get one. What happens is you got 3 twice. So this is called a double root. So you have one answer, but it is a double root. This will show you what that means. Let's do it on the calculator. I mean, this means it has the answer twice. That's what that means. But let me show you what it looks like on the calculator. So it's x squared minus 6x plus 9. If I graph, you can see it's going to cross that 3 right there. It's kind of hard to see, but that does cross the 3, but it only bounces off the graph. It only crosses that one spot, and that's at 3. So that's what the double root looks like when it hits it at one spot. And then you have it. And here we go, right? So when we have something like this, you have 3 different possibilities. You could have no x-intercepts. That means no solutions, no real solutions. You could have imaginary solutions. You can have one x-intercept. This is a double root. Or you have two x-intercepts. This is a normal. So I'm just going to say that. It's just like your normal. You have two answers, two solutions. I should say this is one real solution when they double root. And then this is two real when it crosses like that. Okay. Let's talk about how to solve square root property and completing the square. So let's talk about this is our second way to solve it. One way is this: how do you solve an x squared equals k? Well, you take a square root both sides. That's what we're going to talk about here. So using square root property. So in this case, when you have only one x, if you're trying to solve ax squared equals 0, right? There's only one x, you just solve. I should put ax squared minus c equals 0. So in this case, there's only one x, right? It's not like before we had an x squared plus x like that I had over here. Right here, there's two x's, say the factor. When there's only one x there, and it's only an x squared, you just gotta solve for x squared. You just isolate x squared and solve. So we're going to try to get x squared by itself, then we're going to square root both sides. So let's go to the first one here. Right, I have 2x squared equals -10. Now some people would square root first, and that's not the right way. You got to get x squared by itself first. So divide both sides by 2, get rid of that 2. X squared equals -5. And then we'll take the square root of both sides. That's how you get rid of this x. Now when you take a square root, when you're solving, it's a plus and minus radical -5. Now we can't leave rad -5. We learned better than that already, right? When there's a negative side of radical, you pull it out and it becomes an I. So it should look like this. Plus and minus I rad 5. And there we go. That's two solutions, two imaginary solutions. This answer here would have no x-intercepts because they're both imaginary. So this graph looks something like this. Right? No x-intercepts because it's two imaginary solutions. Next one. Now, same idea here. We want to get the x by its, like, we want to isolate the square part. So let's divide by that 2. I get x minus 1 squared equals 7. Now I can't do anything else besides square root it. Let's get rid of that to get rid of that square. So I get x minus 1 equals plus and minus rad 7. Right, the radical hasn't gone anywhere. It's a plus minus because you took the square root. Now how do I solve this? Add the 1 over. Now that 1 cannot affect anything else besides, it has to be by itself because you can't add 1 and a radical 7. They're different things. One's a radical, one's a number. I mean, radical is a number too, but like one's like something inside a radical, and one's a natural number, so you can't combine them. So I get 1 plus or minus rad 7. And that is two answers. If you want to see it, right, you can split it up and be, if you want to, 1 plus rad 7. It's also 1 minus rad 7. So you do get two separate answers, but for short, we can leave it like that. Next one. Now let's solve by completing the square. Now we did this before with the circle, so we're going to go over that again. Remember, if we want to solve by completing the square, what we do there is we want to isolate the x squared plus bx, set it equal to a number. Then we add the middle term divided by 2 squared to both sides. And then we factor the left hand side. And we simplify the right hand side. And then we solve. So those are complete the square sets. So I'm gonna go over like those are the sets we did before, I'm gonna go over it here. So if I'm gonna solve by completing the square, I want to get the x's by themselves, so I'm gonna move over that too. Just like we did with circles. So x squared minus 4x equals negative 2. Now I have the complete square right here, so I'm gonna get that middle term divided by 2 and square it. So that's negative 2 squared, which is 4. So I'm gonna add 4 to both sides. So plus 4 plus 4. Now remember, after I do that, this side factors perfectly, right? So the whole reason we did this so we could factor this side perfectly. It's always a thing before you square it. So this side's going to factor to be x minus 2, this thing before I squared it, squared. And on this side, we just simplify these two. Negative 2 plus 4 is 2. So I get this, and then I solve it by taking the square root of both sides. Square root this side, square root this side. X minus 2 equals plus and minus rad 2. Then we can just add the 2 to both sides. So we get that. So that's how we solve by completing the square. Now, I'll tell you right now, it does always work, but it's not the easiest all the time. Like we got lucky here. Our middle term was a nice even number. If that number is odd, then once you divide by 2, it gets really ugly. So it's a nice one to do if the situation's right. Right? There's no number in front, the middle term is even, then complete the square is really easy. Otherwise, it gets a little bit hairy. And when that happens, that's when we do the quadratic formula. Now, the quadratic formula does come from completing the square on a general term. So you do the general term ax squared plus bx plus c. You complete the square on it, you get this. You should have done that in another class, so we're not going to do that here. But this is a quadratic formula. And it's, for most people, it's probably their favorite way to solve a quadratic. I mean, unless you know how to factor really well. So, now a couple things. If you want to use the quadratic formula, so first of all, it only works on quadratics. It has to be an x squared. It has to look like this. Step 1, you just set equal to 0. So just like you're factoring, you want to set your quadratic function equal to 0. So I probably should write set ax squared plus bx plus bx. There we go. Plus c equal to 0. Right? And then you get your values. So you want to find a, b, and c. And then you just use the formula. So like that. So x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we're going to do it here. So now this one, if you notice, it's not in the proper form. So I got to simplify it and then set equal to 0. Because if I want to use the quadratic formula, I got to set equal to 0. After that, I'll show you how to solve by graphing. So let's simplify this first. So I get x squared minus 2x equals 2x minus 2. Now we want to set equal to 0. We want to use the quadratic formula. So we're subtract 2x from both sides. And we're going to add 2 to both sides. So I get x squared minus 4x plus 2 equals 0. Right, just moving stuff over, moving that over, moving that over. Now, this is actually the same one we did when we solved by completing square, which would still work, but we're going to solve this using quadratic formula. So let's figure out our values. Right? Our a is the number in front of is your coefficient in front of x squared. So in this case, there's nothing there, so it is a 1. Your b is the coefficient of the x, so negative 4, and c is the constant term, so 2. Keep in mind, right? It's never the x. You don't include the x. It's not x squared. It's not negative 4x. It's just the coefficients. And this is the numbers in front. Quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So if I substitute the values in, I'm going to get x equals negative 4 plus or minus square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2 all over 2 times 1. Right? And then we just simplify. So negative 4 is a positive 4. Now you're squaring this. Please keep in mind when you square a negative, it becomes a positive. This is negative 4 squared, so that is 16 minus 4 times 2 is 8. So let me simplify, write it a little nicer again. So I get 4 plus or minus radical 8. 16 minus 8 is 8, all over 2. Now there's two answers right here. It is 4 plus or minus rad 8 over 2. That's a good answer. If we're going to simplify this, which we should do, radical 8. Remember, the way you break down 8 is it's 2 times 4. And I know the square root of 4. Once you know the square root, you can pull that out. So square root of 4 is 2. So this is 2 rad 2. Right? The 4 became a 2. The 2 had to stay inside. So it's the same thing as saying 4 plus or minus 2 rad 2 over 2. And if you're really pro, you can notice you can divide everything by 2 here. And you just get, well, I should say you should be able to factor out a 2. You get 2 plus or minus rad 2 over 2. And then these cancel out and you just get 2 plus or minus rad 2. Now you get full credit for this, but really pro would be that. So that's how you solve by graphing. Sorry, that's how you solve by quadratic formula. If you want to solve by graphing, you bring your calculator out. Now just start at the very beginning. Just y1, y2. You don't do anything fancy about it. You just gotta go, okay, x minus 2. And then down here you're gonna get 2x minus 2. Now when you solve by graphing, I'm gonna get a decimal. So your calculator's not gonna get you the 2 rad 2 over here. It's gonna get you decimal values. But here's your graph, right? You want to find out where it intersects. So we're going to go second, calculate intersection, number 5. And we just got to get closer to intersection. So it's like right there. Hit enter, 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 enter. And you get your answer, 0.585, which is 2 minus rad 2. So you get some decimal version of it. And then you can do the same thing by the other one. Go back to intersection. Right? All you want to do is get close to where you think the intersection is, which is right there. So I'm going to go up. If you want to go a little faster, you press up, and it's on the other graph now. And you go a little faster there. Just get kind of close to it. Hit enter, then it jumps to the second curve. Is that the second curve? And like, yeah, it is. Hit enter and it hits guess. And you get the decimal for 2 plus rad 2, 3.1415. So there we go. Solved it 2 ways. So let's solve this last one here. Not this last one, but like let's solve this one using quadratic formula. So it's already set equals 0. How nice. So all I gotta do is figure out my stuff. So A is 2, B is negative 1, and then C is 4. Alright, so the quadratic formula is this. All over 2a, negative 4ac. So we're going to substitute everything in. B is a negative again. So negative, negative 1 plus or minus negative 1 squared minus 4 times 2 times 4 all over 2 times 2. So then we're going to simplify it. That's a positive 1, negative, negative. Or again, and then right here, negative 1 squared is a positive 1. Minus, what is that, 32? So I'm going to get x equals 1 plus or minus negative 31 over 4. Now again, we can't leave the negative side of the radical, so we have to pull it out. That's just an I when you pull it out, so it becomes this. This is your final answer. X equals 1 plus or minus I rad 31 over 4. There's nothing else you can do. That's your answer. 2 imaginary solutions. Okay. One of the last things we're going to talk about is let's talk about what happens here when, if I want to figure out what type of solutions we have. So here we had 2 imaginary. Here we had 2 real. There's ugly. Up here we had 2 real. No imaginary. Right? Here we had 2 imaginary. No, sorry, 2 real. I didn't say 9. Here's the 2 imaginary. And we even had 1. It had a double root over here when you get the 1 answer. So we could tell that just by looking at a quadratic formula. If you look at the value right here, that part, that's called the discriminant, and that lets you know what type of answers you're going to have. Since it's underneath the radical, if that thing is positive, I have 2 solutions. If that thing's negative, I get imaginary numbers. And if that thing equals 0, then all you have is this. So you get 1 solution. And we call that the discriminant. Alright, so this is the discriminant. So the discriminant equals b squared minus 4ac. And like I said, I should do it on here for sure. If this is positive, what happens here is you get like a radical 4 or something. Radical 3, you get a positive answer. So that means you get 2 real solutions. So if this is positive, we use a triangle to denote the determinant. So that thing's positive, you get 2 real. If that thing equals 0, the discriminant equals 0. What happens here? Well, that goes to 0. All you have is this guy right here. So you have 1 real solution, or a double root. So 1 real. So double root. And if this is negative, that means you get an imaginary solution. You get no x-intercepts. So it looks like this. It's called 2 imaginary. So the discriminant is less than 0. It is 0 real or 2 imaginary. So you can say either way you want. You can say 0 real, or you can say you have 2 imaginary. Same thing. But that's a discriminant. I will give you the formula for discriminant. You should know it right from the quadratic formula. But I won't tell you this part. This part you have to know. So if it's positive, you get 2 real. If it equals 0, you get 1 real. If it's negative, you get 0 real or 2 imaginary. So next step, let's just use this to figure out how many solutions we have. So right here, evaluate the discriminant and use it to determine the number of real solutions to the equation. If the equation does not have real solutions, tell whether they are rational or irrational. We're going to skip that part. I don't care about that part. So again, I will give you the discriminant formula. That is b squared minus 4ac. Now to do this, we have to set equal to 0 again. And then use the discriminant. Now again, when you use it, if that thing is greater than 0, it's 2 real. If that thing is equal to 0, it's 1 real. If that thing is less than 0, it is 0 real. So let's just use it. Here's my A, here's my B, and here's my C. Plug into the formula, so it's b squared minus 4 times 9 times 4. I get 121. I get 36 times 4, which is 24, 12, 144. So 121 minus 144. So I get negative 23. It's a negative, so that means that our discriminant is less than 0, so it is 0 real. We have 2 imaginary solutions here. Next one, now notice it's not equal to 0 yet, so we have to set equal to 0 first. So I'm going to subtract 4x, I'm going to add 5x to both sides. Subtract 4x, add 5 to both sides, so I get this. Alright, here's my A, my B, and my C. And again, A, B, and C are the coefficients, not the x squared. So A is 3, B is negative 4, C is 5. Use the discriminant, B squared, so negative 4 squared, minus 4 times 3 times 5. And I believe we're going to get another imaginary number. I just picked ones at random, sorry. Anyway, so I get 16 minus 12 times 5, which is 60. Because remember, when you square a negative, it becomes positive, so I get this, which is another negative answer, so another imaginary. So 0 real again. Okay, last thing, we're going to go a little backwards, concept check. So what they want us to do here is like, here's solutions to our equation. So there's like the answer is negative 3 and 2. The answer is 3i, negative 3i. They want to find the basic equation. So I gotta go backwards. So the way you work this is you work it backwards, right? Where do we start off at? When I get an answer, how do I work my way back up? So especially when we factor it, that's way up here. Here we go, right? So if our answer is 3 and I guess 30, then we plug them in inside opposite. We plug them into an equation like this. And then we multiply it out. So that's how we're going to do it. So what we're going to do is, the quadratic like this has a solution that is like x minus a, x minus b equals 0. So we're going to plug our solutions into that, and then we're going to simplify. So then we distribute. So that's how we're going to do it. So like this, look at my a and my b. I'm just going to go x minus negative 3, x minus 2 equals 0. So that's x plus 3 equals, and x minus 2 equals 0. Right? You don't have to do, I'm showing every step, but you can just go, okay, x minus 3 means my answer was x plus 3, x equals 2, so that means that came from x minus 2. Right? Like if I was going to solve this, I would get these answers. So by default, it's this. It's x minus a, x minus b, you just plug it in. Now, I can't leave like this because they want me to simplify, so all we have to do is distribute. So we just got to distribute x times x times 2, so I get x squared minus 2x. Then you move on. 3 times x is 3x. And that's negative 6 equals 0. So I get x squared, add the middle terms, plus x minus 6 equals 0. And that's what they want. I'm going to do the exact same thing if it's imaginary numbers. We're just going to go, okay, plug into this formula. That'd be x minus 3i, and then x plus 3i. I'm going to skip that step I did earlier, right? I did the minus part and just plug it in. So we have this, and again, I got to multiply it out. So you just go x times x is x squared. X times that is plus 3ix. Do this one. Minus 3ix. Multiply those, and I get minus 9i squared equals 0. Now the middle terms cancel out here. Don't forget I squared equals negative 1. So this is negative 1. So I get x squared. And remember, we're multiplying. We're not adding these. We're multiplying. Negative 9 times negative 1 is positive 9 equals 0. And there you go. That's the lesson.